How's it going, and welcome to yet another video. Today we're going to talk about the number one credit mistake that 99% of the people make and how you can fix it. So one of the things that a lot of people do is essentially check one bureau at a time, which is a fatal mistake. What you want to be careful with is to ensure that you have access to all of the three main credit reporting agencies. Namely, you're talking about Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Having to check one bureau at a time and assuming that that's the only thing that will matter, or that that particular score is the most important, or perhaps the only thing that you might be aware of, is actually a fatal flaw, and you want to be careful with that. And the reason why you want to be careful with that is because in some of the bureaus, specifically, let's say you were with Experian and then Equifax, you might have one that's showing 680, and then Experian it might be showing you a 720. So there is difference there, and you want to be able to spot the differences. So one of the other elements, which is number two, is why some of the bureaus differ from different other bureaus is simply because the creditors report different data to different credit bureaus. The relationships that they have as data furnishers vary from one bureau to another. For instance, your car payment might report to Equifax, whereas your mortgage or loan for the house may report to Experian. And if you look at it that way, and if you combine that, you will have variations of between 30 to 50 points, or sometimes even a lot more, depending on the amount of creditors you have on each credit bureau that you have access to. And so it's important that you don't ignore this, right? Because for example, if you're ignoring a single payment that might have been missed in one of the bureaus but not the others, a collection item that just appears out of nowhere, or a small piece of credit that just came out of nowhere due to identity theft, can literally cost you thousands of dollars in interest every single year, simply because you haven't paid attention to some of the elements on each of the three credit bureaus combined. Another mistake that people do is assuming that no news is good news. So the Federal Trade Commission reports that 79% of the credit reporting agencies have errors. And that's kind of deadly if you think about it that way. If you're not checking specifically all three credit reports at the same time, you're likely going to miss some of the items or some of the elements within those credit reporting agencies that don't make sense. They're not compliant, and they may potentially contain errors or mistakes that you might want to take a look into. For example, a lot of these guys might have duplicate balances, late payments, single accounts that just don't add up. So pay attention to each of these elements very carefully. There's also some of the common errors that can literally tank your credit score if you're not careful. For example, accounts that are marked late that were actually technically paid on time. Collections from medical that was never really reported as being paid. Credit limits that are actually lower than the amounts that you have. And even closed accounts that are still showing open. So these are all elements that might potentially affect your credit reports in a negative way. Specifically, if any of the above factors were kind of put into your credit reports. There's also the element of identity theft without you even knowing it. For example, if you look at your credit report specifically individually and you can see that there's an account there that you don't recognize, just that alone, and especially if it's an identity theft situation where someone took your information and applied for credit, that one particular account can actually drop your points by 100. And so you got to be very careful. Some of these accounts that are just unrecognized, things that you look through, you scope through your credit reports, and you look if there's certain things that are not necessarily kosher or things that you haven't seen before, that's the time to pay attention, because one fraudulent account can cause a lot of damage. Now I want to direct your attention to the domino effect that a single late or a negative item can necessarily have on your credit. A single late payment can create a trigger event such as denials, getting limits cut in half, not being able to get approved for certain types of accounts. And so it is all kind of correlated together, hence why we call it a domino effect. In addition to suffering some of those consequences, not only are you not going to get approved and not get credit, but you'll also have your scores drop. And so you got to be very careful on how you handle and monitor your reports. So one of the benefits of having access to resources by the government is that you can actually use a free tool that a lot of people are ignoring. If you go to annualcreditreport.com, especially after COVID, you're able to access a report every single week for free across all of the three credit reporting agencies. You want to pay attention to that, because then you're able to pull the credit, you're able to pay attention to everything that's on your credit report, specifically if there's any errors, certain things don't add up or don't match, or if there's inconsistency in general. You have access to all of this information with annualcreditreport.com. It is a free tool that a lot of people simply ignore. One of the benefits of having access to credit reports is the ability to fix your credit, and the ability to do it in a methodical way and in a very tactical way. And the objective here is to look at your credit report like a pro. Look at the information of the account, how the amounts were reported, the balances, the dates specifically of the last activity, the date of delinquency if there's a last payment that was missed, or a series of different things like the payment grid on a 24 months that'll give you information enough so that you'll be able to identify errors, mistakes, or inconsistencies that can be clearly labeled in a dispute should you proceed that route in order to fix your credit. And a lot of people are afraid to proceed with disputes themselves. And so for me, what I would strongly recommend is treat it like a very basic concept. The credit reporting agencies specifically have 30 days to 45 days to investigate. Now, the difference between the 30 and 45 is that the extra 15 comes if you submit new information as part of the dispute process. But for me, as we mentioned before, you look at the credit reporting structure, you look at every single item, itemize them, look at their information, dates, account numbers, and all of the information that are numerized, including balances, limits that are owed, and so on and so forth, and label them as they are, specifically in a dispute that is very clear and concise to have the best effectiveness in all of this. So with that, I'm going to take a little pause here to remind everyone that you have access to our free community if you wanted to fix your credit, if you want to get a roadmap. In addition to that, access our legal resources to help you further. Go check out the link in the description in order to join our free school community. Now let's assume that you're finally disputing and taking measures in your own hands and are essentially looking to fix your credit. The first thing you want to do is document evidences, right? Specifically, if you have a late payment that's reported, but you know you paid on time, your bank statement demonstrating that you paid on time, any type of payments that went out, checks, etc., all of these information and resources and evidence is valid. And when you're submitting a dispute by mail, which I strongly recommend, you have the ability to make attachments or attach documents of proof and evidence that you've done your part, and then the creditors haven't really complied and made sure that it was accurate, and therefore these pieces of evidences will help you in your dispute process to ensure that you have a successful outcome. And once again, we're talking about a 30-day window for disputes, right? So as soon as you submit your dispute, the credit reporting agencies have 30 to 45 days. Generally speaking, if you're not submitting new information, we're talking about a 30-day window. And within that time frame, the credit reporting agencies will initiate contact with the creditors that you're disputing with, whether it's account balances, information that is not good, inaccurate information, and so on and so forth. And they will ensure that the credit reporting agencies and the creditors have a concise communication pattern in order to resolve the dispute that is currently under investigation. And so the beautiful thing about that is within that time frame, after the investigation is complete, once the disputes have been handled and the creditors have responded to the credit reporting agencies, typically you would get a mail, sometimes an email confirmation, especially if you're using annualcreditreport.com, stating that the investigation is complete, the dispute results are in, and that you'll be able to analyze that. So if you attach the evidence, if you've done your part to do everything correctly without doing any gimmicks or shortcuts that a lot of people are trying out there in the space, you should be able to get a very clear outcome, the desired outcome that you're looking for. But let's assume it's not proper. You have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the CFPB, that you can file additional complaint with. Time to time, they do work. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay. What you need to do is ensure that you have every evidence gathered in order to create a successful outcome. And at that point, you've done everything possible. And let's assume that it's still not good. Then we can talk about the next steps. So let's assume that the investigation results is not positive and you've done everything possible, including filing a complaint with the CFPB. This is where I encourage you guys to reach out to me. Obviously, you can join me through the community, which is the best place to do that because we do have weekly Q&A calls, and we'll talk about the legal process after the fact. And it's not going to cost you any extra bit so long as we've handled the framework of filing disputes for you and following the procedures of structures and processes in which the legal team will require for us to do the work. So let's say everything's good. Now we're moving on to continuous ongoing reporting and monitoring. So obviously, annualcreditreport.com provides you with free access. You can also download your credit reports directly from the credit bureau's websites themselves, and you can have a paid monitoring service to give you alerts, notices, or any type of information that changes in your credit reports, which would allow you to proactively take measures in your own hands in order to ensure that everything stays succinct, compliant, and straightforward for you, especially if you're thinking of using or leveraging credit in the future and you need it to stay congruent and that there's no errors that are popping up. Monitoring is probably the best route to take. And just to summarize, the timeline for investigation is once again 30 to 45 days. So once you submit your dispute, don't forget, I would recommend also another key point that I haven't mentioned is send certified mail return receipts so that you've done everything in your power to gather the right evidence so that it can help you in your dispute resolution process. So I hope this made sense and the video gave you some clarity on what to do. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. We'll be more than happy to help you guys out. If you want additional help and further help, once again, join the community that we have in the description. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Bye for now.